Leadership is hard, but we're here for you. Welcome to Growth Beyond Limits, the podcast for leaders. We believe in leadership. This podcast focuses on discussing leadership experiences from real leaders in various industries and sectors. We encourage transparent discussions that allow our listeners and viewers to be more successful in their own leadership journey. Today, we're joined by Christy Spaeth. Christy Spaeth is a healthcare operations leader who knows how to make complex systems work better, smarter, and more sustainably. With more than 2 decades of experience across primary care, occupational health, urgent care, specialty practices, and surgical centers, she brings a rare blend of strategic vision, operational discipline, and people-first leadership to every organization she serves. Christy, welcome to the show. And why don't you tell us a little bit about why you're here today?
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me, and thank you for the warm introduction. Well, I'm here today. I think meeting our staff where they are is important, and that is a part of trauma-informed leadership. How can we lead people in a way that engages them, supports them, and meets them where they're at?
I think meeting people where they're at is really important, especially in today's world where there are lots of challenges both inside the workplace and outside the workplace. There's so many unknown things happening in the world. I won't get into that. Don't do politics on the show. Could you give me an example? What's one of the things that you think are really important when you talk about meeting people where they are?
Well, Sean, you're exactly right. There are a lot of factors, both inside and outside the workplace, and staff bring that to work. It's hard to leave everything from the outside from coming in. We're people, we have feelings, we have trauma. And one of those important pieces is having some shared decision making around the workplace and around what we're doing. Having authentic relationships with our staff is very important, and having them included in decision making. So you're making a change in the workplace. You have a new process that's coming out. Talk to the people that are doing the work, but actually listening to them and taking their advice. What do they have to say? So actually hearing them and taking that into consideration when you are making process changes, when you're making any kind of changes in your organization. I think that's really important. They will take that when they see that you actually not only listen to them, but then you implement their ideas. I think that's a strong point in leadership. And it goes back to the trauma informed. By listening to their ideas and implementing their ideas, you're building trust with your team. And building that trust is so important and vital to building strong teams, strong cultures, and overall a strong organization.
So with shared decision making, certainly see the value of that in making people or allowing people to see themselves in the products they produce or in the processes they implement. What happens? How do you communicate? Because obviously you won't be able to implement everything suggested by staff. So how do you go about threading the needle of making people feel heard, but then also communicating that their suggestion or desired change isn't really one that can happen?
Well, Sean, I think having transparency, honesty. When you go into gathering ideas on a new process, you may say, there's some regulatory obstacles, there are certain parameters that we have to outline, right? Like we need to stay within these parameters, but I want to take your ideas. Now, we may not be able to implement each and every idea, but I want to hear your ideas. I want to get your feedback because you're doing the work every day. So I think kind of prefacing your conversation that way so that they know that they're being heard, but there are some parameters to what you can and what you cannot do, especially in healthcare. There's so many policies and regulatory agencies that you can't do everything that you want to do. Sometimes because you have to stay within these parameters so that you're staying compliant. So that's important. But, even if you take one or two ideas, I think that shows that you've listened. And going back to your team and saying, okay, these are the ideas that I have given to the leadership team. Maybe there's other people involved. I brought this to the table. And these are some of the these ideas. Or maybe you could take a piece of the idea. Maybe it was this bigger idea and you're like, we weren't able to use all the pieces, but we were able to tease out these two parts that your ideas and this
Hold
is
on.
what we implemented.
I guess that really stresses the importance of building trust and having that relationship you suggested earlier, that appropriate workplace relationship and understanding and knowing your staff comes into play.
Yes. You build those relationships with your staff and building that trust, being authentic, being transparent. They're going to know that what you say matches your actions. And I think that's what's really important in trauma informed leadership. Trauma causes people to have distrust and feel unsafe in their environments. So, whatever you can do to make them feel safe and heard, and those are your actions. You can say a lot of things, but you want to make sure that you're always being honest with your staff to the point that you can be, and that you follow up your actions with what your words say. I think that's what's important. That's what builds trust. That's what builds safety within your team.
So, trust and safety, it really seems like we're starting to talk about a different element of being trauma informed as a leader. And that's probably that emotional intelligence piece. And I think a portion of being emotionally intelligent is also being self-aware of your own emotions and how you self-regulate. So what could you share about that from your experience of being a trauma informed leader?
Well, we as leaders, we're humans too, right? So we also are impacted by trauma.
Most days.
Yeah, right. And healthcare has gone through a lot of trauma. The COVID pandemic, right? It changed the workplace. It changed how we are as leaders. It, I think, in some ways opened our eyes to being more open and empathetic to feelings in the workplace and our own feelings as well. But just having genuine empathy and awareness of not only our team's emotional being at the time, but our own emotions at the time, like you said, and just trying to navigate that in the best way that we can, showing up, being there, being present through whatever life is bringing us in and outside of the workplace.
I think for me, I think self awareness is almost more important of being aware of anything else. I think all good leadership really comes from understanding how you process information, how you like to individually work, and understanding how you like to send and receive communication in relation to other individuals or perhaps different strata within the organization, be it coming from line staff or reporting up to your senior executive staff. I think understanding yourself is really important from the emotional intelligence perspective. I'd want to jump into, I think what's going to be our third point, which is authenticity. And it's a really thin line, right, between emotional intelligence, especially once we talk about self awareness and being emotionally intelligent, understanding where our staff are in the moment or in relation to specific changes or projects or initiatives. I would share that I have in my career, if I look back and I honestly reflect on when I had the most challenges as a leader, it was when I tried to lead in a way that wasn't part of my authentic self. I tend to be fairly direct. Actually, most people would say I'm pretty direct. And in being direct, I have to be measured with my words so that I don't offend others. Sometimes I've moved into organizations where I may have seen problems that were systemic in nature that existed for many years, but being new, you don't necessarily have awareness of all of the work that had been done to resolve that issue up to that point. And that can be a challenge to navigate, especially for a new leader. For a new leader, it's really challenging for someone who doesn't have a lot of leadership experience to come into a new environment and see a problem because the natural instinct as a leader is to go in and fix those problems, especially if they're systemic problems. So with that, what do you think about, the importance of authenticity as a leadership, or maybe you'd want to share some of your examples from your career?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, going into a new organization, like you said, you're not sure of the historical work that has been done in that organization. You're not sure of the culture yet. I mean, culture is really important on decision making and how you come in and you lead your team. And I think, as leaders, we have to have a little humility, go in, we might make mistakes. We might not fall into that culture the way we should be. Like you said, maybe being a little too direct with our communication, and that's not the communication style of the team. So, going in with your ideas, but being open minded to what the culture is and learning about the historical changes that have happened in that organization, and just being as transparent as you can, and authentic to yourself. And when you do make mistakes, and you will, we all do, even as a senior leader, you may find yourself wrapped up in something, and not looking at the 360 view of what's happening, because you like, oh, this needs to be done, and you kind of get just kind of wrapped up in that, and being able to go back and having some humility and saying, gosh, I think I overstepped here, or I think my communication didn't come across the way that I wanted to. And then again, that all just pulls back to building the trust of your team. You know, they're going to see that you also make mistakes, but that you have accountability. And again, just that goes back to just building that trust with a trauma informed team that, hey, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. And when I do, I take accountability to build that trust.
Accountability, I think, is a term that it's often tossed around, but it is not discussed with the amount of importance that it's due. Leaders, we always talk about the ability to delegate authority. You can even delegate responsibility, but you can't delegate accountability. The accountability always rests with the leader. As the leader of an organization or a team, the buck always stops with that individual. And it's so important that it needs to be understood, especially for new leaders out there. You're going to make mistakes. Leadership is hard, and accountability will never go away. So, as Christy suggests, the sooner you're able to humble yourself and accept, I overstepped, I made a bad decision, I wasn't aware of the complexity of the issue, the more trust you'll build with your staff. Frankly, the more trust you'll build with your supervisors, because they understand that you're going to be transparent and steadfast and honest in your work. And I think it's really important. But mistakes happen. And even if mistakes don't happen, there's always the opportunity where things go wrong. There are difficult decisions that need to be made. There are external events that create challenging situations for individuals in their personal lives, in their work lives, for the organization. And I think that brings us to the last topic, Christy, and I know it's one that's really important for you, and that's resilience.
Yes. And I just want to make one more point back to authenticity, and humility really quick. And that is that it needs to be genuine. So when you take accountability, when you're talking to your staff, I think the one key point is it can't just be a statement that you make. It has to be a genuine statement, and that has to be felt. And that is built on the culture that you build with your team, all the pieces that we've already talked about, building that trust, being authentic, being transparent. And when you have all of those in place, that's where resilience comes in, is that you've built a culture of trust, and your team has found trust in you, and they believe what you say because your actions have followed up to your words. And that's where you can kind of create calmness in that chaos. I've gone back during the pandemic again, just it was chaotic. The world was chaotic. The clinics were chaotic. I mean, processes were changing, sometimes literally within the same day. You started off with one process and you ended with a different process. And that's chaos. So controlled chaos is what I call it. I'd like to have some controlled chaos, because sometimes you can't change the chaoticness of what's going on in and outside of your clinics and your facilities, but you can build a calmness within your team. You can build trust within your team and a culture of support. And that's where resilience is okay, we're going to get through this together. We have each other's backs. We trust one another, and we are going to make it through this day. We're going to make it through this hour. We're going to make it through this month. And to me, that's what resilience is just showing up again and again for each other, and just having that team that works that way and that is resilient to whatever is thrown at you.
Agreed. Resilience is incredibly important, and it's much more, as you alluded to, than just sticking it out. It's a system of things that all work together to make the individual and the team more resilient. I just want to touch on it a little bit. One of the things that we haven't talked about yet, which is vision and communicating what that vision or what that mission is, and how important that is across this trauma-informed leadership realm to communicate that with staff so that they understand where they're going and what they're working towards. How do you accomplish that as a leader, especially having worked across so many different industries or elements of the healthcare industry?
Well, that's a good question, Sean. I think at the end of the day, why are we in healthcare? We want to help people. So it's the patients. It's as simple as that. That's our mission. Our mission is to create an environment where our patients can come, they can be treated, they can feel safe, they can trust the care team that is caring for them. And I mean, I guess that's it. That's the simple part. We're there for the patients, we're there for our communities. And when we have a strong team, that's felt through the visit. It's felt from the phone call that they make to make that initial appointment to the final bill that they get. And that's our goal, is that we are there, we show up, we have a strong team, and that flows over, just kind of that culture will flow over. I don't know if you've gone into a place of business and the team works well and it just kind of is infectious, right? You go in there and you just feel, gosh, this is just such a great place to be. I feel great being in here. And then the opposite, you go into a place of business and they're arguing, they don't get along, they're disorganized. You feel that as a customer. And so when we are united, when we are working together, when we are all those things we've talked about, authentic and trustworthy, and you have humility, your patients feel that. They come into your facility and are like, gosh, this is such a great clinic. Everyone is so nice. Everyone's so helpful. They're here for me. They help me through all the steps of the healthcare system because it's a big system. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a lot for patients. They don't understand all the little intricacies that go along with it. So that's why you build strong teams. Is you want to show up for your patients and you want to show up for your community.
You make a great point. I have some experience working in the government, in the public sector. I was in the assessor's office of a different jurisdiction, and I went in to do some business, and I was instantly aware of how organized that particular entity was. All of the operations, it was so organized. The space was well organized. The individuals all worked together. I don't want to say like a machine because of course people are people, but it was such a great experience you're right. You can really feel when teams are working together. Everyone understands their role, their job, how they enroll or activity affects the other. I think it's a great thing when you have those elements all working together. So we've kind of covered a lot of different points on trauma-informed leadership. I would ask Christy, as we start to move towards wrapping this session up, do you have any thoughts, any closing thoughts for the audience, for people who might be interested in becoming more trauma-informed leaders, people who might be new to leadership, or people who may specifically be leaders in the healthcare industry?
I would say, kind of going back to how we started off, meet your people where they're at. So meeting people at your staff where they're at is one, being genuine, but knowing these are each an individual person. They have feelings, they come with a history, they have a future ahead of them, different paths, all coming together, different cultures. So just really get to know your team. And I'm going to say it's okay to genuinely care about each member of your team, like care about them as a person, and that helps you get to know them. And that helps you get to understand their communication styles and how to motivate them and showing up for them, having that open door policy and a real open door policy. Like, okay, you're in the middle of something, but somebody comes into your office, you can tell they are upset. Pause your work for 10 minutes and take that time to sit down and talk to them, whether it is related to their work or their home, because their home will affect their work. I think that's what's important. And you do that every day to the best of your ability. You're going to have teams that are going to support each other and support you in your mission to have a great experience for our patients. One thing not to forget is don't forget to show up for yourself. If you are not 100%, you can't be there for your staff. So you also need a support team. So whether that is a colleague, some sort of mentor, make sure you're also showing up for yourself.
All right. Thanks, Christy. And I also want to thank the audience for making time for Growth Beyond Limits today. Just a quick reminder, make sure that you like and subscribe for future episodes. And as we always say, leadership is hard, but we're there for you. And today we're going to add meet people where they're at. And don't forget to show up for yourself. Thanks again, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.